Uh, my name's Rob Nassif. I'm the owner of the Hen House Rehearsal Studios and manager of the Faim, manager of RedHook. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Perth Drummers Zoom hangout. I think this is a cool little thing. We've obviously had the Perth Drummers hangout day at the Hen House Rehearsal Studios for the last 4 years now. And two of the people that were part of the drum clinic for the last couple of years is one, Steve Judd from Karnivool. Juddy, how are you?
Good, mate. How you doing?
Good, thanks, chap. And Mr. Brody Simpson. Broads, how are you?
I'm good, Robbie. Thanks for having us, man. This is awesome.
No, look, it's a bit of fun, and it's a nice way for us to all get to know each other a little bit better. And I'm loving Chris Dudley's form here of working on the paradiddles whilst this is all happening. It's great, Chris. Keep going, mate. Keep going. Why not? Do the two things at the same time. That's fantastic. So, yeah, guys, I think, you know, the idea behind this is, yes, for us to all get to know each other a little bit better and make the community a bit stronger. And it's also to just have a chat. You know, Juddy, Brody, and myself have all been fortunate to make a career out of drumming. And I think that can be inspiring for a lot of people to listen to, just to hear the story. And if it inspires you guys, that's a great thing. If it gives you guys some ideas, that's a really cool thing too. So first things first, you know, one of the first guests we got here, Juddy, Steve Judd, drumming tour de force in Karnivool. It's a pleasure to have you on here, Juddy. I want to sort of hop straight into it. And if you could take us back to sort of that era, let's call it 2002, 2003, leading up to 2004, when you eventually auditioned for Karnivool. What was life like for you as a drummer? Were you playing in local bands? Were you practicing non-stop? I'm kind of interested in those first few years before you joined Karnivool.
God, going back that far, I think I was playing in a new metal band called Beside the Point, which, you know, lasted maybe a year or two. We kind of all met at TAFE doing the TAFE music course.
Yes.
So kind of started out there, and then met a few people, I guess, you know, doing the music thing. You kind of out playing gigs, networking. Ended up playing in another band, kind of emo, hardcore sort of band, Hope You're Gone.
Yes,
I think
right.
Probably, God, somewhere in between those two bands, I actually met Brody and spent many nights at rehearsal studios just talking shit more than playing, which was half the fun back then. But kind of, I was playing in Hope You're Gone until I think I met Kenny actually at one of the shows somewhere in Northbridge.
Yep.
And I think they'd just finished recording Tomato, the record at the time. And obviously were looking for a drummer. So Kenny kind of came down, asked if I would be interested in auditioning.
Yep.
And, you know, I guess they were kind of like the local pinnacle of that scene at the time. So I was kind of already pretty familiar with the band right into them. So I kind of jumped at the chance. But the audition was kind of set me up for what was to come. Like, if I had known then, I would have been a lot more prepared. But
Did they reschedule the audition for like 6 months after the original date?
No, but I had a rehearsal with my other band at 6 o'clock, and the audition with them I think was supposed to be at 3 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
And you know, they turned up at 5:30, squeezed in like 4 songs, and then I had to go rehearse with the other band. So
that was it. Your audition was 4 songs long.
Yeah, well, that was, I think, so Drew had given me a copy of maybe 5 of the tracks, but one of them was Scarabs, and I didn't play double kicks. So
wow.
At the time, we kind of got through the other 4 tracks, and then he was like, "So how'd you go with Scarabs?" And I said I didn't, because I don't play double kicks.
Wow.
And that was that. And then the rest of it went all right. And then I think the next time I spoke to him, he was like, "So do you think you'll get a set of double kicks? And I said, yeah, sure, give it a go. And that was
Wow.
my intro to doubles. Not really my thing, but you know.
So was it just the one audition, Juddy, or did they then call you back and do another round of auditions?
No, I think they could only fit one into their schedule. The organising to get that one to happen in the first place was a struggle as it was. So it was just the one, and then I think they'd organised. They had a couple of shows, Kalgoorlie and Fano, I think. So we might have hooked up before those shows.
Yep.
A couple of times. I can't really remember them, to be honest, but on the proviso that, do the gigs as more of a session type thing, and we'll see how it goes. But
okay,
the first gig we played was at Judd's in Kalgoorlie.
Oh yeah, how good! Love Judd's.
And we went down with, I think it was Lockdown and another band at the time. So Brad Dice, all those guys were there. But we spent most of the afternoon and early evening just drinking a lot of booze with them. And so this was my first gig playing with samples, playing to a click, the first gig with the band. And I think I'd definitely got too caught up in the good time vibe, trying to ease the nerves a little bit. It went a bit far with it, and I sat down to play the set, and the room had started spinning.
God, for your first show, Juddy, crazy.
Needless to say, the first gig didn't go as well as it perhaps should have. But the next night in Bunbury, we did the old Prince of Wales.
Yep.
And it went a lot smoother than that. So I think after that, that was kind of it. They kind of just asked if I wanted to join and saddled up.
That's amazing. And so, Juddy, when you got, you had a chat to Kenny, they say, okay, we need a drummer. You get the 4 songs from Drew. Okay, you've got to now learn these songs. I think it's handy for everyone on here to hear, being drummers, there's a high probability of auditioning at some point. How did you approach learning those songs? Did you lock yourself in the studio for 2 weeks, or what was your approach to just being 100% ready to nail that audition?
I mean, I kind of grew up just playing along to records, and that's how I learnt by ear. So I'd spent so much time learning in that way that it was kind of, I guess, easier for me to do, just to throw something on and, bash it out until it kind of sinks in. So it was just spending, a week or 2 with the material prior. I had a little home setup at the time, so just bashing out the songs every day until, it kind of becomes muscle memory and you're not really thinking about it too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, normally, I guess I kind of learned how to write basic notation and kind of tab parts just from, because there's so much material out there. I remember walking into the drum shop and seeing future sounds and all the books, and I really want to get into them, but not really having that formal training. I kind of just had to teach myself how to read. I wouldn't say I can sight read, but if I spend a minute with something, I can kind of nut it out. So I kind of, I guess with the Vool stuff, at that point, I would just play through it as much as I could, and then all the little fills or maybe a little change in the groove, a little different variation in the pattern, I would kind of just notate it out. So I wasn't really reading charts, but I would just have, little cheat sheets along the way.
Yes.
So I kind of, I guess I've kept that today I still use that. I'll just hammer songs into the brain until most of it I can remember. And then all the little fills and licks, I'll just write out on cheat sheets.
So Juddy, are you saying you never got lessons, during this period, before this period, when you picked up drumming? Were you totally self-taught, or have you learned? Did you get lessons?
I think in my life I've had 2 drum lessons.
What? That's crazy. I didn't realize that.
But that was, in my 20s. I had one with the Darren Ferrugia. He used to play in the Hey Hey band.
Yes.
And some guy in Frio, I can't remember, but wasn't that great. But kind of, I think I was more stubborn enough to put in the time and just learn things my way, and kind of helped, I guess, with the creative side of things too, because I didn't have anything specific to draw from, or it was kind of just stuff I'd heard that I had my playing influenced by.
That's great, man. And then so what happens? Do you eventually get a call? Do they like call you down to, or do they say, hey, Juddy, meet us at the Flying Scotsman at 1 p.m. We want to talk to you, to deliver the news that you're in the band? How did you find out that you got the gig?
It wasn't, God, I can't remember there being an official chat. I know after the Bunbury gig, the second one,
Yes.
As I say, it went a little bit smoother. I was sober for that one, so it definitely worked in my favor. And I remember speaking to Kenny afterwards, and he was like, hey, look, that one was much better. Hey, would you be keen on, joining the band if everyone's down? And I was like, yeah, totally. And then I think their manager at the time, I spoke to maybe a week or two later, and she's like, hey, look, we've got shows. If you're in, you're in. It's like, cool. That was it.
Fantastic. That's
I
so
think
cool.
The Kalgoorlie gig nearly destroyed it, but the Bunno gig was the redemption one. So
yeah, like it could have gone a totally different way, Juddy. Thankfully, you brought it back at the Prince. Oh, that's awesome, Juddy.
It's a lucky save, that one.
Oh, it's brilliant, mate. And you were saying you and Brody met at what period of time did the two of you guys meet? What year are we talking?
God, I remember the first time I think I saw Brody play was a campus band's heat at, what's the club near?
Near Hippie Club in Leader. Yeah. Whatever that was called at the time.
Yeah, so that would have been what,
2003
maybe? 2002, 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been the last year I was playing in my new metal band.
Yeah.
And I think we had a heat with Rhodes Band.
Fantastic.
So that would be the first time.
Yeah, that's how that went. No, you guys were playing our heat because I think you'd won some heats, or you'd won something year before, and like they always had someone who'd won some of the stuff, or part of the campus band's kind of like headline each heat at the time. It was a weird setup.
Yeah, I think we made like the final the year before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then guested that show or something. But yeah, that would have been, I don't know if I can't even remember chatting. I think it would have been hey, you're good at drums. That would have been the first meeting. But
good banter.
Yeah, great banter between the two of us. That was probably all that came out, I think.
Hasn't gotten much better, to be honest.
No, it's awesome. And look, for the benefit of everyone, Brody is a long-term friend. I guess I would have met you, Broads, down at the Hen House when you had the upstairs permanent room. I think it was with the Siren Tower. We got to know each other pretty good there. For everyone else's benefit, Brody is also the owner of Underground Studios, a fantastic recording studio in Perth. What's particularly interesting to me is what you've created through social media with 36,000 plus Instagram followers, and everything from that to the Get Good Drums pack you've now got. So, Broads, I sort of was looking back at the last sort of 10 years from when we first met, and after a bit of A-grade social media creeping, it looks to me like around 2015 you kicked off the at Brody Simpson Drums Instagram page, as well as the YouTube page. So what was the thinking back in 2015 around, where you wanted to take your drumming?
I was just seeing that a lot of people were doing it. And I was like, well, it'd be kind of stupid for me to, own a recording studio and have some video equipment and not do it.
Yeah.
So it became a thing that I could do to start getting my name out there, so that I could look for work, basically. Like the work that I wanted to be doing, I wanted to be playing on records and doing drum-related work, whether it was recording myself for projects or recording other people. So it was just a good opportunity to do that, really. And like I say, there was just so many people doing it, and I thought, well, hopefully I can do a good version of this. and that's kind of what I've been spending the last 5 years trying to figure
Yeah.
out how to do as a good version of that. And then it slowly morphed into kind of being less about being like some sort of flash drummer to kind of get social media hits, and then it became more about concentrating on sounds and the recording side of it and trying to build a little bit of a niche kind of market there, which is
Yes.
slowly and surely starting to see results, but I'm not very good at the social media marketing game. I don't dig the clickbait aspect of it,
Yes.
so I avoid that like the plague. So it's a slow burn, but I think now that means kind of actual meaningful relationships with different people around the world that might want to be involved in something that I do, or have me involved in something that they're doing. So that was the whole premise, was try and get my name out there as a drummer and as a recording engineer.
And would you say it's worked? If you look back on it, has there been new work as a result of people that have discovered you through social media?
Yeah, and especially in recent years, the last probably 18 months or so, I've started to actually start to see work coming through from the social media thing. Like I say, I build it really slowly, and the whole thing's as organic as it can possibly be. I'm deliberately trying not to do anything that's kind of typical kind of clickbaity sort of stuff to kind of get a massive reach. I'm not really concerned with that. It's actually, I'm trying to build a community of people from around the world that that I can actually work with, as opposed to trying to get millions of followers, because I do chops.
Yeah, totally.
I do
But
chops occasionally, but not all
yeah,
the time.
and that's what we want you to do, chops, bro. So don't stop doing the chops. But I think it's a good point you make there, in that you really have created a niche in the sense of the sounds. Like if I go to some of any of your last 20 posts, so much of what I'm reading in the comments on Instagram is about the sounds that you're pulling, and I think it's pretty amazing, because it is definitely a new angle to the drummer on social media game. But talk to us a little bit about the sounds idea and what you're doing there to sort of differentiate yourself.
Yeah, well, the sounds thing came about basically because I wanted to stop doing the fancy choppy drumming stuff. I didn't really care about it, and it's also not what's going to get me any work, or not the sort of work that I want to be doing either. Like, I'm not trying to wow an audience with fast stuff. I want to play on cool songs, and
Yep.
the nature of the whole recording game now is not that you hire a session drummer and a studio and you all go in there at the same time and everyone nuts out songs and it takes forever to track a record. That's not how it works anymore. People basically want to send me an email and say, hey, here's a couple of tracks, we're looking for this kind of vibe. So the more important part now is actually the sounds, because I'm trying to deliver what they would have gotten if they'd gone through the usual process of hiring a session drummer and a recording engineer and their producer in a studio and all that sort of stuff. I'm trying to do that as a one-man band, essentially. So the sound thing came about because that's where I wanted to take things, but also because I started working on the kind of more electronic and kind of hip-hoppy sounding playing. And to me, that's like 95% sound. And that just became a big interest. And I noticed that people were interested in that, and it was also probably the thing that I was enjoying the most, so I just kind of stuck with that avenue. Kind of painted myself in a corner now, though, because if I want to do a video, it's got to sound really good. I can't just throw my phone up and do something, because it's not really what I'm doing now, but that's fine.
No, it's great. I think that's a real interesting angle I just want to chat about. In many ways, what you just described is you're a virtual session drummer. And I think for a lot of people listening on this Zoom, they probably, myself included, to be honest, didn't realize that in itself was, I guess, an industry. I mean, do you get a lot of work of people doing exactly what you explained, where they need you to lay down drums? So you're a session drummer, but you're doing it all virtually.
Yeah. I'm getting more work now because I've been terrible at promoting the fact that I do that. It's not really in my DNA to do so. But now that I'm kind of growing a bit of a following, and I'm growing a following in the right audiences. Like I'm growing, there's producers and engineers and songwriters and stuff in there. It's not just drummers wanting to see chops. So now people are starting to slowly come to me for that thing, and come to me for a specific kind of sound as well, which is kind of what I wanted. You know, it's fantastic. Like, I'm happy playing on almost anything. Certainly couldn't sit down and do a bebop record or an extreme metal record.
Yeah.
nor would I advise anyone to hire me for those things.
Sure.
But yeah, building it organically and slowly has gotten the people, like, a real sort of a real following of people that actually kind of know what I do now. So they're coming to me for that. I just today did 2 songs on a Zoom session with a mate over in Sydney.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's almost more, actually, I would say it's actually considerably more productive than having someone in the studio tracking
Really?
drums. Yeah, because you just kind of cut out all the bullshit. It's like, it becomes an inconvenience to take a break. So, you know, we just sat there for 2 hours straight, knocked out a couple of tunes, and then I went away and did what I needed to do and sent it off. And it's such a great way of working. I think people are becoming more accustomed to working that way as well. And also, budgets for records don't allow for the old model anymore anyway.
Man, my mind is blown here, because I really never thought of this as a whole thing. So when you were on the Zoom with this chap working on the 2 songs, are you behind the kit, and are you then playing through the song saying, hey, I think in verse 1 this sort of groove could work, and getting feedback in real time over Zoom with the person?
Yeah, so I'm running my full recording setup that I would use for any normal session. And basically, instead of sending everything to my headphones, I'm sending everything to another interface and a separate computer. And so basically, they are hearing as good a quality as Zoom can produce the sounds that will end up on the record, you know, minus a little bit of fixing and whatnot that I'll do later. And yeah, just literally run through the tune, and they're there. They can talk to me the whole time I'm playing as well, which, you know, can get a little distracting.
You went a little out there, Brody.
I encourage the heckling. I think I play better when I'm angry anyway. So yeah, so it's like a real time thing, and they can kind of basically hear what the sounds are going to be that I'm going to deliver to them anyway. And then if it was something more complicated, I'd probably just kind of sketch out the parts and be like, okay, cool, that's what we're going to do here, that's what we're going to do there, and then end the call and maybe spend a little bit more time tracking it. But the stuff today was pretty simple, kind of loop-based stuff, so I literally tracked the songs while we were on the call, and then came back into the control room after we finished the call and did a little bit of editing and sent them off.
Brody, I think you need to create some sort of video that shows this whole process, because this is fascinating. And I bet there is just an entire world of musicians that just have no idea that that's how it could work. You could have a world-class drummer from the other side of the world playing on your track. That's just incredible.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit over the last few days, because these are my first real kind of Zoom sessions. I've done lots of remote stuff, but it's always just been like a bit of correspondence via email. Then I'd play the tracks and send them back, and every now and then it's like, can you redo this little thing or whatever? But most of the time I get no feedback, which is fine, which is great. I basically want people to put the tracks I send them in their session and then forget that they ever hired me unless they want to work with me again. I feel like I've kind of done the right thing if that's what happens. But yeah, the Zoom thing, man, it's I don't know, it seems like it's more fun somehow as well. I'm not really sure how that works.
Amazing.
But there are a lot of remote session drummers out there, but I think doing it via video call is kind of a newer take on that.
Newer angle. Broads, I can only assume that, sorry, Juddy, I'll throw it open to you after this, but I can only assume that the Get Good Drums pack that you launched with the Periphery Matt Halpin crew has gone some ways to, you know, helping you along your journey. Do you want to just explain to everyone what that Get Good Drums pack is and how it came about?
Yeah. So it's just a MIDI package, so it's not the actual samples. It's just a collection of MIDI grooves for people to use in demos and songwriting and that sort of stuff. So I'd actually done a couple of them for Toontrack beforehand some years ago. They'd do Superior Drummer and Easy Drummer, and I did the first one because Juddy had gone and done a sample pack with Forrester.
Gotcha.
The Progressive Foundry pack, and they needed a MIDI pack to go with it, and I ended up doing that. Steve and I both ended up doing bits and pieces on it, and then we were like, we have absolutely no idea what you actually want. So we sent some stuff through, and they're like, yeah, this ain't it. So I ended up buckling down and kind of redoing everything and figuring out what they actually wanted. So it's just a collection of grooves, and they're kind of broken up into songs and kind of broken into, verse, chorus, bridge sort of sections and a few variations for each thing. And it's kind of aimed at like a songwriter or a guitarist or whatever it may be to just be able to grab grooves that suit the genre they're looking at doing, drag them into their session and play along with them at whatever tempo. And the Get Good thing came about purely through social media, actually. I've been sort of corresponding with a couple of the Periphery dudes, Misha mostly, the guitarist, and he hit me up a while ago. He's like, hey man, we should get you to do a MIDI package, and then I ended up speaking to Matt about it, and then did it, and sent it off, and it was all cool.
Fantastic. Juddy, do you have anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I guess for B Dollars over here, for the production side of things, I guess you've been quite proactive in how you've approached building your profile and kind of developing different ways to that you kind of come across session stuff and get work. But I guess I was wondering what sort of made you want to switch to the behind the scenes stuff where you're more into the recording side of things and developing that production side as a skill to have as well.
Yeah, right. As much as I kind of still love playing gigs, I love playing gigs. Everything else around them, I don't enjoy in the slightest. And I think even, like, I distinctly remember as like a 9-10-year-old jamming Silverchair tunes with my brother on the farm. Yeah, I'm a hick. And just being like, I don't want to play this song because my drums don't sound right. They don't sound like they do on the record. And so I think I've always been probably more fixated on recording and the sound of drums than actually caring kind of about performing them in front of people. Like I say, playing a good gig is the greatest thing you'll ever do, but everything else around that, just I started losing, well, not losing interest in it, but the cons were kind of outweighing the pros. And you also get more than one go at everything in the studio, so that's for someone who's the level of perfectionist that I am, that kind of works really nicely for me. Yeah, I will definitely play more gigs in future, but if I don't play a gig for the next 6 months, I'm not going to be bothered about it. The studio thing, I like to be involved, like being involved in a song and like taking a song from kind of a demo idea and whatever it may start with, and then building it from the ground up and actually turning it into a really cool finished product. That's the thing that excites me much more than performing that song in front of people.
So how did you first get into the studio side of things then?
Bought a studio.
Good way to do
it.
Yeah. you kind of got to do it pretty quickly. Yeah. You realize when all of a sudden you just dropped a bunch of money on a studio, you go, I'm going to have to probably learn how to do this. No, so Underground came up for sale. Well, not for sale, actually. So Matt Gio, who used to run Underground, he'd taken over Couch. And he still had Underground, and he was looking for Mark McEwen, my business partner. He was kind of looking for him to maybe run Underground for him. And I had not so long beforehand quit my job at a music store. And I was like, well, I'm going to need something to do. So I talked Mark into buying it instead. And then I worked 12 to 15 hours a day renovating the place, and then I'd spend 4 or 5 hours every single night watching tutorials on YouTube, learning how to record things. I kind of got reasonably good at it by doing it. As soon as someone tells me to learn something, I no longer want to learn it. So I'm much better at learning things on my own terms. So that was the route I took. I wouldn't recommend that. It's a much more stressful way of doing things than you probably need to worry about. But it's working out after some years.
That's awesome, Broads. Quick question, Broads. There's going to be a bunch of people tuned in that are sort of looking at what you've done with creating your social media presence. Any advice for people that want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah. My whole ethos on the social media thing has always been to do a thing well. Don't just do anything. Like, don't cast like a ridiculously wide net for the sake of reaching lots of people if there's no real desired result or no real actual plan in place.
Yeah.
So from day dot, I always tried to kind of, even in the most basic form, even when I was just filming with the camera, the mic in my camera, because I wasn't really at the point of pulling great drum sounds, I would actually still sit down and try and craft. And that was when videos were like 15 seconds on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
I'd try and actually put together like 15 seconds of actual cool musical ideas, not just blow chops.
Sure.
Some of them were definitely blowing chops though. Yeah, so I just really concentrated on trying to do it, like pick a lane and try and do that really well.
Yep.
And then, like I say, not worry about trying to reach 1 million people, try and reach a couple of thousand of the right people.
That are passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, people that are going to be interested and are going to be interested long term, and possibly people that you'll work with down the track in like a real meaningful manner, not just people that you'll kind of chat with online. As much as I have, a lot of people that I kind of chat with pretty regularly. It's a pretty amazing community out there of drummers on social media, which is wicked. But yeah, I was always trying to build towards finding people that I could collaborate and work with on an actual real musical level.
Brilliant. So cool, Brods. Hey, Juddy, I'm going to handball the question and answer over to you, buddy. If you've got anything you want to add for either of us.
Yes, for Rob. I guess we're all kind of drummers that have come up in the Perth scene. I guess I wanted to get more of an idea of how things started out for you with Gyroscope, and how you found it coming up in the local scene at the time, and how you developed into, I guess, the international touring act that you guys became.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Juddy. Yeah, I mean, it took a bloody long time. That's the one thing I'd say. And part of the reason I think it took a long time is we just weren't very good. We started in 97. I guess Zoc and I started the band in 96. Started playing our first few shows in 97, 98. We were still in high school. And then really played over 100 shows, local shows in 99, and then did another 100 local shows in 2000. And by about 2001, we did start getting better, because at the same time we were rehearsing twice a week, gigging twice a week. So really like 4 out of 7 days a week for a good 3 years there was just dedicated to trying to make Gyroscope better. And at the same time, I mean, I look back on it now, we were having a great time. It's not like we were schlepping to all these shows like, we were bummed about it. We were going to gigs, playing in front of 9 people, but, stoked that we were getting a free jug of beer and meeting so many people along the way, people that I'm still friends with. Obviously did the Zoom interview with Kevin Mitchell from Jebediah, who I met in 98 as a massive fan, became friends with all the Bull guys, Drew and Kenny back in 97, 98 as well. And so, yeah, I think for us, it was just I think when I look back on Gyroscope, what we had was a passion for what we did, and it was always fun. It was always really enjoyable. So even though it did take an absolute really long time to get the train rolling, really until like 2003, we signed a record deal. So that was really 6 years after we started. And then we only dropped our first album in 2004. So a bit of a long gestation period, but
that's a full schedule, mate.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why I've always looked at the whole Vool thing with fondly. So yeah, I think the backbone of what we did was we loved what we were doing, and it's probably why I ended up playing in Gyroscope for 23 years, and the boys themselves are still going, because it's still so much fun to create music and then to play it live.
Speaking of live playing, I had another question regarding, I guess, your approach to, how did you vary your approach between live playing and, say, studio tracking? Because I know, God, we've done shows together. I've seen you play, just smashing away, high energy.
Yep.
For a live show, but do you try and take that same vibe into a studio, or do you find yourself changing the way you're approaching when you're tracking?
I do change my approach just because I think you have to. If you, and Brody can speak to this, but if you're going in there and you're absolutely murdering your cymbals in the way that I tend to playing live, your engineer and producer are just going to be hating you. So it is change actually the setup itself. So, you know, live I would typically be playing a custom projection, 20-inch crashes, 21-inch crashes. Whereas in the studio, I'll go smaller and I'll go thinner. I'll go to a 17K dark, thin crash and maybe an 18. So smaller cymbals. And then when I am playing in the studio, I still want to keep the energy up because the energy component is and always has been such a big part of the Gyroscope live show. We want that to transfer. So it's not when I'm in the studio, I'm not just sitting there either. I'm rocking out. I've usually got the headband around the earphones so that I can still like be moving around going crazy. Got the look, got the vibe, and but I am conscious of, you know, really glancing the cymbals, being a lot lighter on the cymbals, and then being very consistent with the hits. Like another thing, you know, I learned in recording multiple albums and EPs and singles is just being really consistent with your hits, so that again, it just helps with the actual quality of the groove and the track that you end up with. So yeah, I think there is an adjustment to be made there, and really so much of whenever we were going in to record an album, that for me was the most important time in being super prepared. Like you were saying, we basically get the headphones on, be in the rehearsal room and be playing those new songs that I knew we would be recording just all day and all night, so that you just know them, so that when you're actually in the studio, you know there's going to be changes through pre-production, but it doesn't matter. You can roll with those changes because, you know, 90% of the song is already down in your head.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Good advice. Play your snare the same way every time. That's what we're looking for. Don't murder your
the number one goal.
Hi-hats are the enemy of the studio.
I know. Yeah, I've experimented with the hats as well, using 13s but you know, Broads, I see in some of your videos, I don't even know if they're hats or two crash cymbals put together, or 15s. You've got some interesting setups there.
There's some real dickhead setups going on there.
Yeah.
That's like me. Experimenting, trying to find stupid sounds, trying to actually play organic sounds that sound like weird electronic recorded sounds. That's kind of where I've come across most of that stuff, I think. That, and also just to see what happened, and just to see if you can actually play 19-inch hi-hats without it sounding bad, and also without it feeling like you're, you know, punching a bag of mud, which is kind of what it feels like when you're playing them. Yeah.
Totally. Broads, I'll throw it open to you if you have anything.
Yeah, actually, Steve's led me into my question for you, Rob. Perfectly. Thanks, Steve.
Not a problem.
You're a good friend. You've made it look like I've been paying real close attention this whole time.
Happy to help, mate.
Yeah, Rob, I was really interested because a lot of bands work with the same engineers and same producers over and over again. So this is kind of like a question that will, I think, actually help me quite a bit. Gyro's worked with, I actually made a list of the producers across the records. So you guys worked with like 4 different producers on the 4 albums. How did you find their different approaches to work with them? So their approach of getting the best out of you and getting you to play in the way that they needed in the studio for the sound that they kind of had in mind, and the setups that they were using. Was that a different experience each time, or were you kind of left to your devices to do your thing?
It was very different each time. I mean, and it was good. It was good that it was different, because I really learned so much about my playing and being a musician from all 4 of those experiences. So the first album, Sound Shattering Sound, was done with Sean O'Callaghan, who sadly has passed away. He was a producer based in Fremantle, owner of and creator of Couch Studios, which is where we tracked Sound Shattering Sound. And actually, we had come across Sean because he had worked on the first couple John Butler albums. We had done an EP with him. He was a brilliant producer, brilliant. And I just, what's so interesting is out of the 4 producers we used, I would put Sean up there in their league. And he was a guy from Frio that loved windsurfing. His whole life was geared around windsurfing. And as soon as the wind came up, he'd be in the middle of a session and he'd be like, right, guys, okay, Rob, we've got a great take there. Great take, but the wind's come up. I'm going to call it and I'm going to go get a windsurf in. And that would be it. You'd be like, okay. But it's what we loved about him. So there was like, so that was very interesting, but his ear was so incredibly sharp. He would say things and you think, no, I don't think you're right about that. And then you'd listen back and he was always right. So he was amazing and really the perfect person for me to spend a bunch of my first, 2 or 3 recordings getting to know, because he was very welcoming and he kept us very engaged and was a positive influence on everyone in the band. We were still young and we were still working it all out. Moving on to the second album, Mark Trombino, famous for doing Jimmy Eat World Bleed American and Clarity and Blink-182. And so big time LA producer. We flew to LA and we started work with him. And man, he was just not my guy. Like fantastic producer, like world-class producer, no doubt. He basically listened to, we had 12 songs we were going to record. And he was like, I think these 6 songs I can add something to, and the other 6 songs I'm not going to touch. The 6 songs that he worked on, he was really good at. And then the other 6 he just left, which I didn't really mind. But I think what was really difficult for me was he just gave you no support. Like he was like the big time producer. He's worked with many drummers that are way better than I am. And he just gave you nothing. So you'd be, in the studio grinding away and working really hard at trying to, get a great take. And it would be like, okay, that's no good, do it again. But there was very little constructive feedback and it was always so cold. And I remember like the first day of drum tracking went really well for Are You Involved? We knocked the first 4 songs. I picked the 4 easiest songs and I knocked 4 songs out, after getting sounds and everything, knocked 4 songs out really quickly in like 4 hours. And I thought, here we go. All right, all the hard work, it's going to be okay. But then the next day we came in and that first song, we were debating over this drum fill and we'd been debating about it in pre-production, what to do with this drum fill. And he kept saying, no, I think you should do this particular drum fill. And he was a drummer. He got on the kit and played it. And I was like, that's a great drum fill, but that's Sad But True by Metallica. And he's like, yeah, that's it. It was just that. It's just, it was that fill. And he's like, no, it's different. And so we went and listened to Sad But True in the control room. I'm like, oh, it's really the same. And anyway, so we went back and I said, look, just let the tape run. I'll come up with a drum fill. And so we were doing that, for a good 45 minutes. He calls me to the control room and I walk in and he goes, just play the fucking drum fill, Rob. And I'm like, dude, this is my drum track. This is our album. Like, I respect you as a producer. You're amazing. I love what you've done. But at the end of the day, you're an opinion and you're an opinion I value really highly, but I'm going to go back in there now. I just want you to roll the tape, put it on the loop. I'm going to come up with the drum fill. And when I've got it, I'll come back in. So we did that. And I was all shaking and all nervous because I just had this altercation with Mark Trombino and went in there, spent another 45 minutes, eventually came up with a drum fill I was really proud of. And song ended up being cool, but it was a real battle. That whole week of drum tracking was a lot of that. I remember practically sobbing on the way home from the studio after the 4th day of tracking. Me and Dan were in the back seat and Dan's like, you okay, Rob? And I was like, yeah, I'm totally. And then I kind of broke down and started crying. I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. So it was a terrible experience with Trombino for me, but I look back on the album and he did, his lack of positivity, which I really feed off, did make me a better drummer and did make me sort of work really hard. And then Dave Eringa for the 3rd record, total opposite, super supportive, put lights, rope light around you. And it was like your energy force field. And so, he was great. And that was different as well, because we tracked that whole album live. So we reamped everything, but we tracked everything live. And so it didn't feel as lonely as it can sometimes feel in the studio, where it's just like you and you've got your scratch tracks and everyone's looking at you. That was really cool because we were all in there. We had our little force fields around us and Dave would come in there and make you laugh and do a crazy dance if you were having trouble. And so that was really great. But the absolute best producer that I worked with was on our 4th record, Gil Norton, who we used Gil Norton because he had done Foo Fighters' Colour in the Shape. He'd done Echo Silence, Patience Grace by the Foos, some Jimmy Eat World, all the 3 of the 4 Pixies records. This guy was like really in the big leagues. And Gil was incredible because he took what he did so seriously, but he never made you feel like you were below him. It was always like a conversation. And it was usually like he would have a glass of wine in hand. He would sit in the middle of the room. We did 2 weeks of pre-production and we would play through a song and he'd finish and he'd swill his like glass of wine and he'd be like, Rob, I'm really not sure that drum beat works that well with the rhythm guitar. What do you think? And I'll be like, well, you know, I've never really listened to it. I sort of locked it down with Brad on bass and then you go, well, let's play it again. And then we would play it again. And that whole process was great. He was nurturing, he was caring, but he was like very serious about what we were doing. And then he would always encourage you, even if, you know, you weren't hitting your track. So all of those producers had a massive influence on me. And I feel very grateful because it's sort of, I learned so much of those guys. It's stuff that I use today for drumming, but then also helping the bands I manage. Even like running a rehearsal studio, there's some life lessons I learned there. So there we go.
Yeah. Man, that's fantastic. It's so good to hear you say like there's, you know, you've worked with people that are nurturing and also people that are just straight up brutal. Because I've seen both those things happen, and I've seen the result that, you know, the effect that it has on the person that's kind of track at the time. There's nothing worse than spacebar, undo, do it again. Record.
Yeah, it's
like you need a lot more than that. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, man, the Gil Norton thing you were just saying with the, you know, 2 weeks of pre-prod and everyone in the room and sitting, that's the dream, man, from someone that's trying to produce records, is like the luxury of that kind of time to work on a record in its infancy.
It's so important.
It
is a rarity
these days.
It is, and like the importance of it can't be underestimated. Like for instance, when we had written 30 songs for Cohesion, and we'd sent all the songs to Gil, and we had agreed with Gil, we'd narrowed it down to like 18, and then but we were really focused on 12 within Gyroscope, and then Gil was like, "Well, I really love this song, Baby I'm Getting Better. What do you guys think of that?" And we're like, "Well, we like it, but it's a country song, and we're trying to do a rock record." He goes, "I know, but the melodies are so good. Can't we turn this into a rock song? We can take it from a country song, we can turn it into a rock song." And we were all looking at each other like, I guess, you know, it's Gil, so you kind of, you don't want to shoot Gil Norton down. And we're like, I guess he goes, "Come on, let's do it." And so we all walked into the thing. He sat down in the middle again. And then we kind of looked at each other like we didn't really know where to start, because it was literally a country song on acoustic guitar, and we were all behind our instruments. And then I think Brad just started playing like the bass line, and then I just tried to make it like a bit sort of punk rock. And then really in the space of about half an hour, we wrote Baby I'm Getting Better as it is now, as the full band arrangement. And it ended up being the key single off that album, and still one of our most popular songs. And I think the song that got the most radio play, and really a song that wasn't even really up for consideration for recording, but you use someone like Gil, who's got a finely tuned ear, you experiment, and magic can happen.
Yeah. Oh man, that song was huge.
Yeah.
And so I can only imagine like punishing on your right hand live. Like there's a lot of hi-hats in that song, man. Yeah,
actually the worst is the kick drum, because it's like, you know, and it's just, I remember and at that point when we were doing it, like, and we were working the song out, Gil was like, "A little bit faster." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So then he'd bump it up 4 BPM, and then we'd do it, and he'd go, "Oh, I think it's got to be a little bit faster." And I was thinking, geez, this is getting crazy. So in pre-production, I knew the tempo was right up there. And then, you know, come 2 weeks later when we were tracking the song, I was really concerned about it, because I'd been practicing. Yeah. In fact, I'd been practicing so much, I pulled this muscle in your bum called the piriformis muscle. And I sort of pulled it halfway through tracking the album. I was like really worried about it. I was taking painkillers, and that was affecting me. And so the day we tracked Baby I'm Getting Better, I thought, oh, geez, this is going to be so tough. So I drank like 2 Red Bulls. I had a coffee, and then we got in there and we got it done. And It's good fun.
Man, those songs are like a real pain in the ass, literally a pain in the ass
It
to
was.
track. And it's quite often that kind of song where you're doing something simple, but you have to do it in a manner where it sucks to do.
Oh,
And
totally.
then, but the end of that process, though, when a song like that, and especially if a song like that ends up being like a big single as well, that's the ultimate. Like that's what you're looking for in every record. Is like you're looking for those couple of tunes where you just go, I don't know about this tune, and then eventually it comes together, and it's huge. Man, they had some like sync stuff as well. Like I'm sure I heard that song on a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, got some sync stuff. We knocked back a big sync on that one for Hungry Jacks. They approached us, and what they wanted to do was re-record the song. So it wasn't like they just wanted to use "Baby I'm Getting Better" for their ad. They wanted to re-record it, and they wanted us to re-record it and change the key lyric. Well, just Dan actually. It was just Dan that had to change the lyrics. So instead of "Baby I'm Getting Better," it was "Burgers are getting better."
Oh.
Like, I think it was, and it was like.
Right.
It wasn't an astronomical amount of money. It was 50 grand. And we're like, you guys got to be kidding. Like, we're not going to change the lyrics to a song for the burger company. So we said no to that.
I mean, they're the only lyrics I'm going to hear from now on, though, Rob. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Awesome, bros. Well, thanks for the question, man. That's really cool. Juddy, I want to fire back to you quickly, mate. And I hope some people ask some Karnivool questions because I've sort of left that for a bunch of people. But you know, the Karnivool journey, man, there's so many points I'd like to touch on. But I guess was there a moment for you with Karnivool where you felt like, you know, you'd really made it as a drummer along this journey?
God, I wouldn't really know what making it as a drummer is, I suppose, but just the first tour we did, I think, or the first proper tour I did with the boys was the COG, so the New Normal album tour. Yep. So I think we were opening the 3-band bill for that, but I think at the time, maybe it was Shutter Speed that was getting a bit of traction on the J's. So there was like a little bit of a following developing. Things were kind of bubbling over a bit. And you kind of got a sense of that as, you know, as an opening band on a touring show, you're kind of not expecting to see a lot of people out the front. But I think a couple of shows in, we're having, you know, we played that and maybe it was the Martyr, you know, there's a bit of a sing-along. You feel that kind of groundswell building up and I kind of just started vibing on that energy and that felt like the biggest thing for me was connecting with that many people at a show. And for me at the time, it might have been like 50 to 100 people. But that just finding that connection that early for me, I think was huge.
So cool. So cool. And Jody, I'm sort of intrigued, like what your feeling and perspective is on this whole like thing. It gets brought up in every Karnivool interview and I'm just going to do it here for the benefit of everyone. But the distance between albums for Karnivool Records, it's famous now. It's a known thing. And I'm interested to know, do you think it's a help in the sense that it gives you enough time to create these masterpieces, or is it a hindrance in that it does take so long?
A bit of both, I think. You know, the first two records, there were 4 years between each one, or 4 years between. I think EP to record, record to record, 2 to 3, and now we've progressed to a 7-year gap, I think.
Yeah.
With no signs of slowing down, so I think it's a blessing in that there's no real rush. Like obviously we have support from a label that kind of knew what they were in for when we signed on. So there's a real pressure. It's not like we're a commercial act, so they're not kind of waiting for the next hit single or having to feel like they're having to pump something out. So it's a blessing in that regard that there's no external pressures for music. There's no rush to get it done, but in the same sense, having that luxury when you're a kind of mix of guys that tend to go off on tangents when it comes to writing and you're trying to appease 5 creative people that are trying to pull songs in different directions, I think not having any deadlines doesn't help in that regard, because we always think we have, time to find the perfect version or the version that's going to appease everyone. But I don't think that's ever the case. I think there has to be a willingness to compromise. But when it comes to the creative side of things, I think that's not something people are willing to do when you've invested so much in, in your creative output, and everyone kind of feels so attached to the material.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard one to manage. But in regards to the latest record, I have no answers in when it's coming out. I think we're all as
Come on,
confused
Juddy,
as
give us
each
a
other.
scoop. Give us a scoop, Juddy. What the hell? It's been 7 years. People are frustrated. We're upset. We want an album. Let's go.
I'm leaving.
We've recorded. Oh, we can go on a date anytime, $10. We've recorded 2 songs, so
it's a start. It's a start.
Things are rolling. 7 years in, we're 2 songs deep.
Yep.
But I think, we're going to try and get another couple done over the next month or 2.
Well, that's good.
I guess this current ISO period's kind of not helping with, everyone kind of being separated. But we're just working through a couple of the old tracks that were kind of put together. So we're just going to kind of pick one at a time and start trying to make some progress on those, and maybe just change the way we approach recording. So we're not looking necessarily just to go in and get an album done. I think we're just going to chip away for the time being, a song at a time, until we kind of build something that gives us a better direction as to where we want to go with it.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Very cool. It's look, everyone's excited for it. We can't wait. I think it would be good to just get something out there. Just drop a song on us, and so we can just
love to, mate. I would love to.
Yeah. It doesn't strike me as you're the one holding this back, but no one's holding it back. It's cool that you guys respect your creative process. So seriously. Brody, quick one for you, mate. Like, you obviously, we've talked about what you've been up to the last few years, but you were in local bands, and you did the local music scene. Any sort of key takeaways for you coming through the music scene and doing what you did? That, I don't know, like, and at the same time, you also see so many local bands coming into your studio. You're a drummer, you're in a local band, you're trying to work your way up. Any tips, advice, thoughts, musings?
Musings, possibly. Advice, I don't know if I'm qualified. Man, the whole thing with making music in any capacity for me has always been about trying to be as good at it as I could possibly be. So, like, kind of not taking any shortcuts, approaching live shows very much in the same way that I would approach actually tracking a record. Like, I always actually enjoyed the process of trying to play the song as close to the recorded version as I possibly could. Because I kind of always felt like, we spent so long writing these goddamn songs and getting all the parts together. Like, I should probably try and, honor that version of those songs. I think the type of music I've been involved with in a live capacity has always been something that kind of required a reasonable amount of precision anyway. But yeah, like, I just feel like without any sense of competition at all, I think you should always be trying to be the best musician in the room and the best band on the bill. Yeah. I don't see any reason not to do that. Because it's just, there's so much in a live show that if you've got all the energy and everything there, that's one thing. But if you can do the energetic thing,
no.
Yeah, I just saw that pop up in the chat too. If you can do the energetic thing, but also like actually really nail the songs,
yes,
then that's the ultimate for me. I love seeing a band play a song incredibly well live. I'm kind of less, I care less about the energy side of things. I would almost rather just hear them, like, even if it's a live version and things are different, but like really nailing a thing on stage. And I think when everyone's so locked in like that and you've put in the rehearsal time and you've actually put parts together and everyone knows their parts they're playing, it's just such a great thing to see a really cohesive band on stage. And that's kind of always been the advice that I've given anyone, or my input to anyone that might have asked, is like, always try and be as professional and do the thing that you're trying to do as professionally and as good as you can possibly do it. So I guess my advice is do it good.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Juddy,
Same
how about
advice.
Yeah.
Juddy, how about you, mate? I mean, there's lots of people on this now and in the future that will watch this that are in local bands. Any advice for a young aspiring drummer that wants to one day play a show in Mumbai to 5,000 people like you've done? Any thoughts, advice?
Look, I think Brody nailed it. Do it good. Anything you do, approach it with the passion and energy that you kind of want to get in return, I think. So if you're, driven to play live shows to 10, 20 people, I think if you want to get anything out of that experience, you've got to put everything you can into it, and I guess try and look for the same energy back. That's kind of when you feel like you've made that connection. The playing side of things is just practice, put in the hours. I don't think you can shortcut that. There's no real cheat to getting better. I guess some people might be more naturally gifted than others. They have a head start, but it's always the people that put in the more work come out on top. So
yeah,
just work at it.
That's cool, man. And I think in the case of drummers as well, like that notion of working hard and being ready, that's kind of what I love about your story, Juddy, is, you were ready. Obviously there was an intersection of, Karnivool needing a drummer, but when it came time for you to audition and do it, you nailed it. You nailed the audition, and it ultimately changed your life in a crazy way. So, putting in that time and effort, it's never really goes to waste, because you never know how it's going to impact your life later on.
No, and the more opportunities you get like that too, you kind of learn how to work best for yourself too. So I've kind of, sat in on gigs, auditions along the way, and found through the same processes I had to go through with Bull. I've kind of worked out the best way for me to learn material and kind of streamline that process a bit. So you kind of learn a lot more about your own playing in that way too.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, guys. Before, any last questions from Brody or Juddy before I throw it open to anyone that wants to ask a question?
I say we go to the chat.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's go to the chat. Tom, I will unmute you there, buddy, and you're good to go. Tom, do you want to, throw it open to some of the questions from everyone?
There's been some awesome questions. I'll throw the first one over to Jake Morton. If you want to unmute your mic. He had a question for Steve and Brody, just with regards to Rob's cymbal choice and how you guys feel about cymbals.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve, Tom. Thank you all, I guess, before anything, for putting this on. This is like super, super inspirational, just hearing all of these stories. Yeah, so thanks heaps for your time.
No worries. That's great, Jake.
But Rob, you mentioned your choice of cymbals regarding the difference between what you play live and in the studio, and I was curious. It's kind of a two-part thing, whether or not, and it's to Steve and Brody first, whether or not they resonate with that, or if they take a similar perspective or approach within their studio stuff, and also across the board for all of you, whether or not that corresponds to your shell choice as well, regarding size and perhaps even wood and skin selection, all that nonsense.
Awesome question, Jake. Juddy, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I guess you have to, for me, I guess you have to adapt to the environment, as Rob was talking about before. So, if a song in the studio is calling, for big, loud crashes, that might not be that you're laying into them as much, but it might still be the same cymbal selection. I guess it's just finding the right tones for the right tracks and marrying what works. As far as shells, the same for me. Live, not so much. I kind of tend to stick to one kit that can kind of hold it down for all the songs without varying too much. but in the studio, I think you've got that time to be a little bit more selective and approach it kind of individually, track to track.
For sure. The live thing, live you're looking for something that covers all bases. So, and also in terms of cymbals, you're looking for something that projects live. You're not always going to have the required microphones to reach the required amount of ears. In the studio, I think it's actually really interesting to bring up. It kind of runs across the board for a lot of musicians, but you do need to be really open to using gear that you're not necessarily comfortable using or you're not used to using, because the ultimate goal is like what actually sounds good in the monitors in the control room. Nothing outside of that matters. Right? So like if you are playing a snare that, feels like it feels like you're hitting mud, then but that's the thing that actually works for the tune, then that's what you do for the tune. Everything outside of that is kind of irrelevant. And I've definitely been involved in projects where I've been playing a drum sound that literally sounds like trash in the room, but through the mics, it's the right vibe. So you've got to be really open to that. What Rob said about thinner cymbals, especially thinner in the studio, is definitely the way to go. You want a cymbal that speaks as efficiently as it possibly can so that you don't have to beat the piss out of it, because like I say, cymbals are kind of the enemy of drum recording. And also a cymbal sounds the way it sounds. You can't do much to alter the sound of a cymbal. So if it's a bad sounding cymbal, it's a bad sounding cymbal forever. So that can be a pretty tricky thing to try and fix later in the process.
Yeah, that's awesome, bro. Agree with everything both guys have said, Jake. In regards to shells, I mean, for me, in regards to recording, whenever I was recording, even when it was in Perth, I would get as much gear as I could to the studio. So that would be a case of, even on the first album, would be calling up my drumming mates in Perth. My buddy Justin Samolsky had a DW Collector's kit. So I brought that down. I had my Brady kit. I borrowed friends' snare drums, cymbals, just so that I had options. And for me, man, this is part of like the fun of drumming, is that nerdy shit around why is a 17K a better choice than a 19A custom? And then talking through with Brody, this is why, listening through the monitors. I mean, I lived for that stuff. When I was like 19, I first met Damo Petrelli, who's on this, because I went into his music store in Fremantle and was like, what's the difference between a Sabian AAX and a Sabian AA? And then Damo was the right person to ask, because we spent the next 90 minutes talking about that difference, and I ended up buying some cymbals. So I think I live for this stuff, and that's why I relate to that question, Jake. I think it's awesome. So good stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'll throw the next one open to our man Lewis from Remission. Lewis, did you want to jump in? You had a wicked question as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks again to Rob and everyone for putting this together. This is like really awesome. But my question was, or for everyone, how much time do you kind of set aside for recording drums for a full album? Because all the stuff I've kind of done, usually because of budget and kind of time restraints and there's no money behind it, I've had to nut out like a full album in 2 days or less. And I'm just kind of wondering, when you have, money and means and time, like how much is usually set aside, and if it's, kind of the more important thing that you put more time into, or like, how you guys kind of go about it in that aspect.
Awesome. Broads, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, I think the answer to how much time you need to do drums is yes. There's not really a great answer for that, apart from it just depends so much on very specifically the style of music as well. Quite often if you're doing say you're doing like a pop punk record, or even a metal record, you're going to go with a pretty similar sound set across the board. And normally people who play heavier music as well come in way more prepared than everyone else. So you can kind of roll through stuff, providing there's no major hiccups in the actual tracking in the playing side of things. I really do try not to do more than 2 or 3 tunes a day, just because the amount of times we've done 2 really good versions of tunes and then 1 not so good version or 2 not so good versions because I've just made the drummer do 1,000 takes and he's kind of knackered. So I would always say allow as much time as you can possibly afford to track drums so that you can focus on getting good sounds and changing the sounds if you want to change the sounds from song to song, which is a really good way to, get like a more kind of world-class record, is to actually have different sound sets for each song or different appropriate sound sets for each song and not compromise on that. And then allow yourself enough time to track so that you can get the right performances, but also have time to experiment on actually honing the parts even further to really get the best possible version of that song that you can get at the time.
That's awesome. Juddy, did you have any thoughts around this?
God, I guess I could add to that. As long as it takes, really. I guess there's so many variables at play when it comes to the level of band, the budget, and as you said, means to do it. So, God, if you've got the money and you can spend a bit more time searching for the sounds you want, tracking without fatiguing. I mean, God, tracking Sound Awake for me, I think we did the majority of it in a week at one studio, and then a few tracks, or maybe 2.5 tracks at another studio a few days later. But obviously not everyone has that much time. For me, it was great in that I think tracking, you're kind of tracking 10 hours a day. 5 hours in, you start to fatigue. It kind of, for me, I felt, my playing was suffering at that point. So you kind of have to have a break, step away. If there's other people in the studio where you can, share the time, they might be able to track guitars, do something in the meantime while you get a bit of a breather. But, that's, some people don't have that luxury. So if you've got, as you say, 2 days to track a record, it's just about trying to get as many of the sounds as you are chasing prior to the tracking, putting in the time to learn the song so you can do it as efficiently as possible and spend the time maybe replacing parts, fills, sounds afterwards. But yeah, it's just as long as it takes, as long as you have to do it to serve the songs, I guess.
One other thought there, Lewis, is maybe you don't need to track an album, because if you don't have enough time to really get a great result, rather than doing 10 songs, maybe the answer is doing 5 songs and doing an EP or 3 songs, so that that everyone, including the drummer, including has the time to get what they need, so that you've got a world-class product. This is the one thing I would say, like, it only takes one song that's special that can open up so many more doors. And so sometimes it's a little case of less is more, I would say there. But great question. Tom. Oh, Tom's still on mute.
Sorry.
Unmute you there. Oh, sorry. There you go.
I'm back. Lewis,
Great.
that was a good question. I want to throw the next one open to Tanfi. He had a few questions for Steve, but I think they apply to everyone. So Tanfi, if you want to unmute your mic and jump in. Well, I don't know if they're here anymore.
Maybe not. Maybe next one.
All right. Well, we'll jump into the next questions anyway. Oh God, this is all broken down for me.
Well, I've got a good one. I'll jump in here. Well, it's not a question from me, but it was Damo Petrelli. Do you want to unmute your microphone? I really liked what you sort of put in the chat here. Advice to your 20-year-old self. Do you want to ask that question?
Okay, you there?
Yeah, gotcha, Damo.
Cool. What was the question about looking back on your 20-year-old self? What I'd like to get Brody, and actually yours and Rob's and Steve's input on this as well. But I'm nearly 45 now, and so 25 odd years ago now, looking back, one of the things I think I not so much messed up, because everyone loves their music and everyone loves making the best of what they create. But I was certainly really protective of the music that I was making, and you know, we'd spend hours and hours and hours just trying to like put things together that once you perform it on stage, it doesn't make that much difference. You know, it was more about the actual overall performance as a band rather than this little 2-bar section in, you know, bar 107. And going beyond even the performance itself, one thing I realize now is that looking back, if I'd spent more time learning about how to move through the industry, learning to meet the right people in the industry and network, and actually developing a bit more of a business brain to sort of understand how to get the things that your band needs by learning to talk the lingo, learning how to understand where dollars should go in, how they need to come out, whether I could have actually got more for myself sooner, or maybe pushed it to, you know, even more than it ever was. I kind of feel like more about making it in a band seems to be what happens off stage rather than on stage. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on this one, Damon. I reckon this is an awesome question. And so much about what we're doing right now kind of addresses that notion, because I think you're right. I think there's always two things that are working simultaneously when you're in a band, and that's the music creation, but then the business side of it. And I do a lot more of the business side of it now through managing the Faim and RedHook. And I think everyone that's listening to this, if you know, being a musician is what you want to do and having a career in music, I think you can't neglect that other side. So the music comes first, and that should be your key focus of attention, being a better drummer, being a better songwriter. But you do need to address the networking component and know that you need to educate yourself. And so that's kind of where this whole Zoom thing has come from, because I think personally, like in the last few years, it's hard because there's so much information out there. What I kind of like about this is everything we're talking about is trying to tailor it to West Australian musicians. And that's why it's nice to hear all of our various stories, because it can provide some inspiration. But I think people need to get on the front foot with this. So if you're a young musician and you're listening to this and you've seen myself, Brody, Juddy talking, and then you're jamming down at the Hen House Rehearsal Studios and you see Steve there, be on the front foot. Go up to Steve and say, "G'day, Juddy, I watched your Zoom hangout with Rob and Brody, thought it was really cool," and have a chat. Put it out there, converse, you know, tell them about your band, and doing all of that stuff. It's small little things, but over time it starts to add up and make a difference. And within Gyroscope, I was that person, because naturally it's sort of, I'm good with speaking to people, and there's usually someone in the band. And to a certain degree, what Brody has been doing this last 5 years is that same thing with networking and growing his personal brand, which I hate to use, but it's kind of true, through socials. Brody, what's your thoughts around all of this?
Yeah, that's, you pretty much summed it up, Rob. Like, I think that was one of the main things that turned me off trying to do the band thing successfully, is I wasn't really interested in that side of the industry in terms of having to be involved in that side of the business side of the industry from the like live performing band kind of thing. The personal brand thing, like you say, again, it's a naff term, but it's something that I've been using more frequently recently. Is such a huge thing, and you'll notice if you look at social media for a particular band, and then look at the social media accounts of the individual members of that band, it's the individual members that people are connecting with. It's not the band's page. Even if you went so, like, you know, as upfront as to look at the follow accounts, which is, you know, not necessarily an indication of anything real, but individual members are kind of doing more of the work now. And I think that's really the big thing. It's like, if you want to have a band that is kind of getting out there and being successful, the people in that band individually need to kind of actually build their own personal brands at the same time, which is a tricky thing to do, because there's definitely going to be someone in the band that's really good at that and really wants to do that, and then other people in the band that don't.
And look, let's face it, this stuff is hard. Like, you know, I wanted to do this Zoom type thing for like, it wasn't going to be a Zoom. It was just going to be a podcast where I did exactly what we're doing now. I've been thinking about doing this for about 4 years. And what really held me back was having to put myself out there. Because, you know, there has to be some self-promoting. I'm putting up a video on the Perth Drummers thing for the first time ever of myself playing. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. And people would look at me and think, "Oh, but Rob seems like a pretty confident guy." and I am relatively, but still putting yourself out there for these things is hard. And Tom will know, like before we did the first Zoom with Ian Kenny, I was absolutely freaking packing it because I was so nervous. And it's
you and me
only
both,
with,
buddy.
yeah, it's only with like taking that first step of putting yourself out there and doing it that you start to gain confidence. But I digress. Juddy, did you have thoughts around Damo's notion around, you know, working on the stuff that is required off stage, you know, to fulfill your musical career?
I guess kind of just on what you were saying there, I guess the willingness to kind of put yourself out there and seize those opportunities when they arise. Even when it comes to talking to people about the business side of things, meeting meeting management people in the industry, and kind of taking that opportunity to get as much info from them when you can. I guess I kind of steered clear of that from most of my early 20s. It wasn't until I was maybe a year or two into the Vool side of things where I was starting to pick up more and more on that side of things and kind of learn about the business side of things from them. But I think the earlier you get into that, the better. The more information you're armed with, the more it helps. So
that's awesome. Damo, back to you, Damo. Like, what's your take on it? Like, I guess, you know, you've been around the industry and for quite a while now, and whilst you might be 45, you only look 35, so there's a bonus there. What's your take on this? Like your key learnings, I guess, from the last 25 years, from Syzygy onwards and the whole thing.
I don't think there is a formula. That's the thing. It's, you know, just what I've noticed is that if you have somebody, and this sometimes clashes, because if you have a couple of people in your band who perhaps are good communicators or they do have a business brain, then you have more than one person trying to steer your ship, and that can be problematic too. But I think you need to have somebody who knows how to drive that ship. You look at your pooled skill sets and you say, well, you're a great player, you're a great songwriter, you're neither, but you know how to talk to people. And that's the guy that looking back in hindsight, the one that can talk and network, say the right things, get themselves into the right gigs, for example. They tend to be the people that lay down the path for the band. Not all the time, as again, it's just my reflection.
Yes.
But, you know, the music is great, but I kind of look at music and gigs as your reward for doing all the off-stage work. It's not, gig is not the opportunity so much. You know, in my experience, the gig is great and you need to do well at that gig in order to perhaps get more gigs, but those gigs aren't going to happen until someone gets off stage, meets and talks and goes and books it. Or someone can approach you and talk to you about doing it. You have to perform well, but you need to also be performing well off stage in order to create new opportunities for your band to get back up there and do it again.
Look, 100%. Everything you just said there, Damo, is so spot on that it hurts. And I think this comes back to having, like, say you're a 4-piece band or a 5-piece band, 5 people or 4 people, however many are in the band, that are all pulling in the same direction. So we all have different skill sets, and being in a band is the bonus there. So like if I look at Gyroscope, use that as an example, Dan Sanders, our singer, is a pure artist. Like he's a 100% pure artist. Like last time I was at the Gyro studio, you know, he's got like a hip hop album on the go. He's just released Herd of Cows, which is like a grunge thrash record. There's like multiple Gyroscope albums worth of material and ideas there. Pure artist. Doesn't want to know about the business, doesn't care about the business. And you know what? Nor should he. Because what Dan can do as an artist is really important. So for him to be in the best headspace, he can't be thinking about the business side of things. So we identified that early on, and that Dan just lives in the creative world. Then on the polar opposite side of that is me, where I wish I had 10% of the creativity of Dan, but I've got the networking skills, which he doesn't have. Then just alongside me is Zoc in the band. Well, that's sort of selling Zoc short because he's incredibly creative. But Zoc was like lucky. He had the creative side and the business side and would work on that with me. Whereas Brad, like Zoc, also sat in the middle. And what we did was we really, everyone had their roles and everyone had their tasks. And it is a case of divide and conquer, especially in the early days until you can get a manager that can help step that up again. But I think this is a really important question. And yeah, thanks for asking, Damo. That's great.
Wicked. I'll throw the next one open to Tanfi, who's ready to go now. He's got the mic unmuted, the video unmuted. And he has some great questions just with regards to recording and for writing at home or writing for a DAW for an album, as well as I think it's going to answer a lot of questions that have been in the chat with regards to warm-up routines, practice, and a bit of injury as well. So Tanfi, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, thanks. So my question to Steve was basically how do you approach writing drum parts in general for Karnivool's music? How you start with the transcription, or maybe in a DW, or you just basically hear the guitarist and then start jamming the drum kit.
Juddy, did you get that?
Yeah. So my approach, I guess, to parts kind of varies depending on got a ton of things. So there might be, days where I would come into a studio just to be practicing. Would come up with a little groove. One of the guys would walk into a room, start playing along, and then it kind of evolves from there. On other occasions, someone might have already written a riff, there'd be a bass line, so you're kind of laying something down that fits with that, as opposed to, having a set groove prior to that. Sometimes it would just be from everyone being in a room together and jamming. I remember back at the Hen House, we used to jam for 2-3 hours, and sometimes it would be the same thing over and over until it would evolve into something else. Sometimes you'd have a few drinks, muck around, jam nonsense for 2-3 hours, but then kind of filter through all that. Like if we'd recorded it and there might be, 4 bars of something that locks in, and that's kind of where the song starts from. So it varies depending on what's happening at the studio, I suppose. But yeah, there's no set way I kind of look at writing a part, to be honest.
How about you, Brad?
I think I've always tried to, especially in more recent years, think about the arrangement of the whole tune, and less so much about like what's the drum part. Doing, a lot of the stuff you're going to end up playing, especially if you do the session thing, a lot of stuff you're going to end up playing is going to be not much. Like you're going to be playing the absolute bare minimum, which is what so many producers want now, especially the amount of times I've been told do absolutely nothing and don't dare even think about hitting a crash cymbal, which is great. Less stuff to set up. So what I tend to focus on there, because the parts aren't necessarily something that's going to be heavily syncopated or, following a really intricate pattern of any sort, it's really the small things. So like really focusing in on like, okay, how can I vary the dynamics of this hi-hat part just to give it that little bit of extra seasoning, right? Even in a particular groove, like, are my ghost notes really quiet and my backbeat's really loud? Is that appropriate for this kind of thing? So it's kind of like the minutia of the part that is kind of going to really sell the feel of the drums once you've got the sounds right. And being open to doing very little, like the absolute bare minimum that is required to actually give the song some forward motion. Not being too precious about what you're playing, really thinking holistically, like, is the song getting better, or am I just getting to do more cool shit on the drums?
That's awesome, Bryce. Another question Tanfiz had there was, Juddy, do you have favorite rudiments when you practice? Is that right, Tanfiz? That was one of the questions?
Yeah, I want to know what kind of approach do you have while warming up in general, like before a show or before tracking in the studio. How do you generally warm up, or do you have any favorite rudiments that
I think I missed the back end of that. Was it just favorite rudiments or rudiments to warm up with?
Yeah, favorite rudiments to warm up with, Juddy.
God, so when it comes to shows, I kind of maybe spend no more than sort of 5-10 minutes just playing singles, doubles, just to kind of loosen up the hands a little bit. And then I spend a little bit of time stretching and maybe skip for 5 minutes, kind of anything that loosens the upper body. But yeah, I don't really spend a lot of time pre-show playing. I guess we're kind of playing for an hour and a half, so I try not to burn out before the gig. But you know, singles and doubles to a click is usually enough for me to kind of warm up for a show.
How about you, Broads?
Basically the same thing. Like, not a strict routine of any sort. It's kind of more for me about getting used to the feel of having sticks in my hands right before I get on stage, when I have to know how it feels to have sticks in my hands pretty intimately. So if it's going to be any pad work, it's going to be real basic singles, doubles, paradiddles, really just trying to get some blood to my hands and get used to the feel of the sticks, especially if you've had like a long show day with a sound check earlier and then you've had to wait multiple hours and all that sort of stuff. You know, it's just getting comfortable again.
Yeah, totally, man. Tom, did you want another question?
Yeah, I'll throw the next one open. Ben Copland had like a 1.5 part question about practice. So Ben, if you want to unmute yourself and jump in.
Guys, I just want to say thanks for doing all of this. I'm actually over in New South Wales at the moment.
Beauty.
Yeah, my question is basically, how much time do you guys, well, when you're in bands, I suppose that's more so for you and Rob and Brody, but how much time do you guys practice and what do you practice? And then on top of that, what keeps you motivated?
Juddy, do you want to take the lead?
Yeah, I guess as far as motivation goes, it's the passion for playing and just the constant desire to get better. I guess that never, well, I'm not sure about if it's the same for everyone, but that for me has always stayed pretty consistent. It's just something I love to do. So I kind of, as far as practice goes, it just depends on how much time you have. I might have 2 hours at a rehearsal studio to kind of play and end up spending an hour and a half of that time noodling around if I've got nothing set to practice. I might have 20 minutes where I kind of lock into some rudiments or hand patterns, or you're kind of working at one groove, and you might get more out of that 20 minutes than the 2 hours of kind of faffing around. So I think if you go in with a direction and a goal and what you want to achieve, it doesn't really matter the time you have to get it done. It's how productive you are with your time.
Yeah, that's cool. Broads?
Yeah, I think practice needs to be kind of compartmentalized a little bit, because there's certain things that you probably should be working on at any given time. So like if you're about to go in to track a record, or you're about to do a run of shows of like, power pop stuff, maybe put away the left foot clave for a couple of months. That's not really necessary at the time. Unless you
not the left foot clave, come on.
That left foot clave, mate. I tell you what, the amount of gigs I could have had if I'd just been good at left foot.
What if it's a Latin pop gig?
Well, if it's a Latin pop thing, then it might be the appropriate thing to work on.
Then you get rid of everything else.
Yeah, that's all you need for the Latin pop gig, just the clave.
Left foot clave.
Just play clave. 3-2 son. I'm a big fan. Yeah, I think compartmentalize the practice a little bit. So if I don't have a practice routine per se, but there'll be weeks where I only do pad work because I'm really trying to brush up on a technique thing, and there'll be other weeks where I have a kit set up and all I do is improvise, which is something that I sort of always neglected. I think that's a really important part of playing drums for me now, is like improvising and learning how to do things on the fly, because you develop so many skill sets that you almost can't get through regimented practice. But yeah, compartmentalize and really first and foremost practice the things that are appropriate to the situation that you're going to be playing in the near future.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I guess for me, Ben, I'm sort of going back to the, time where I was really busy, writing, recording, touring with Gyroscope. A couple of things I did was, before our second album, I went and got 10 drum lessons with Vinny Kriya, who's a local legend of the drumming community here in Western Australia. And those 10 lessons were fantastic. And I said to Vinny, I didn't really want to go through I didn't know how to read drum music. I was totally self-taught. We did learn how to read drum music, but it was done through the lens of, he knew I was a rock drummer in a sort of rock band. And those 10 lessons really helped, create my, new ideas, excitement around drumming for that second record. And then I did the same thing again for the fourth record, where I think it was Greg Brenton. I went and got another 10 lessons with Greg. And then also spent a lot of time doing things outside of just drumming. So like a big thing I used to love doing, really since the start of Gyroscope, was looking at song structures and then writing out the song structures of songs to get an understanding as to, how the verse, chorus, pre-chorus, bridge all fit together. That for me is part of the musical education that helped keep me motivated, not just for drumming, but for songwriting and sort of trying to grow the band. So I hope.
What about now, Rob? What about when you want to hit the skins in New York? What do you do?
Mate, I go to a rehearsal studio that I can catch the train to. It's called the Sweatshop, and you can. They've got the kit, everything's there. I just take my sticks, take my earmuffs, so I can jam along to some tunes, and I go have a practice there. But it's an absolute dump. This place is disgusting. It's disgraceful. I feel dirty walking in there, and every time I'm just like, what you could do if I could turn this into a. But no, still.
It's time for Hen House NYC, Rob.
Yeah, mate. Broads, I actually tried in 2015. I found a site in Bushwick and negotiated the lease, and I flew to New York to sign the lease. And then the day before we were signing the lease, the landlord and the real estate team were like, "Oh, we've just changed one part of the lease," and it was a 20-year lease, which they had then changed to 7 years, and so ended up being a deal breaker and not happening. And came back to Perth, and then that's when I heard the Faim rehearsing down at the studio, and that ended up. So just this is the story of life. Little events, the way they work, change what's going on. But one day, I would absolutely love to do a rehearsal studio here in New York.
That's wicked. All right. Well, the next one I want to throw open to Quinn. I got a question for Brody about his creative process. Quinn, if you want to unmute and jump in.
Hey there, guys. Thanks for this forum. It's really beneficial to all of us.
Yeah. No worries, man. Good stuff. Thanks, Quinn.
Yeah, appreciate it. Look, my question is to mostly Brody. More, I guess, just really your playing resonates with me. Is when I listen to your drum sounds, they fit really well together, even though they're all almost, if I can call them, quite obscure, where you'll have a really, really, really deep kick sound, a very high-pitched snare, and some kind of what seem to be using like jazz cymbals, and then you're applying them to hip-hop type beats, break beats, that kind of thing. How do you go about, what's your creative process in creating this kind of thing?
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoy them. It's very much a top-down approach. So I just came to the realization a little while ago that so much of like that kind of hip-hop and neo-soul and R&B sound it is really individualistic sounds in terms of like a producer would have picked kick drum sample A and snare drum sample C and hi-hat sample whatever. And so that's kind of the way I approach things now. So I'll actually tend to start by getting a bit of a sound set together, some sort of a palette to actually play things on. Whether that be tuning a snare in some ridiculous manner or a kick drum in some ridiculous manner, whatever I may be doing. And then it's not so much setting up something because I have an idea of what I want to play. It's normally setting up something, getting a vibe for the sounds, pulling the sounds, and then figuring out, okay, what actually sounds good to play on these sounds. And then through trial and error, finding the things that I like that kind of sound good on that palette of sounds, and then trying to refine that into some sort of musical idea. Basically everything I'm trying to do, I'm really trying to like think a few steps ahead in terms of like, is this going to end up being a musical idea that both stands on its own but could also very easily be used in a project. And then once I've kind of figured out that sound set and what I'm going to play, then it's about really closely monitoring how I'm playing so that no details are lost, and also the sounds are kind of speaking in the way they want to speak without me playing in a manner that kind of steps all over those sounds. Because so many people approach drum parts now, like especially producers and songwriters, they really approach their drum parts from like, I want this kind of sound, and then it's your job to kind of play a drum part that suits that sound. So that's really what it is for me. It was experimenting with sound that kind of got me into that whole mess.
And would you say that you're coming from a more jazz improvised approach? Do you think you're coming from more a hip hop approach?
Certainly not jazz and improvisation. I think it just so happens to be that I've gravitated towards doing kind of more of those kind of electronic and hip hop sounds. So I'm not coming at it with like, I'm just going to throw shapes at the kit and see what sticks. Like from the get-go, I'm really trying to actually put together a part, which goes to my whole ethos of like really trying to do something really well as opposed to, see what sticks.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, mate.
Good one.
Thanks, Quinn. All right, Damien Petrelli had a great question, but I think it was for Brody, but I think Rob with his management could also have some brilliant insight. So, Damo, if you want to start up.
Yeah, to either or any of you really. Albums. So in most of the days gone by, the albums were always had a certain number of tracks on the album, and that was typically limited by the media itself. With CDs and different types of media. And now that there's sort of more of a push to sell the single, and being that everybody now is going digital, that really leaves no cap for how many songs you can have on an album. And so the reason I pitched that to you, Brody, originally is because you're recording bands, and like, have you seen a shift in, whether people even want to record albums now, or is it all about the single? And are we going to get to a point where someone who is a fan of a band maybe pays to subscribe to the band and they get their music and it's like a monthly thing rather than buying an album? Or like, where do you see the future of the album as a thing?
The album still seems to be the goal for most bands that we're working with. But the amount of times Rob brought it up before, and it's exactly the conversation I've had with so many bands, is like, do you actually need to be recording an album right now? So it tends to be that bands quite often want to do an album because they've got 12, 10, 15 tunes, whatever it is, together. But they really just want to do the album just so they can put all of those songs to bed at once, as opposed to really going, okay, well, do we have 12 great tunes, or do we have 5 good tunes and a whole bunch of filler? So I've had the conversation many, many times with different bands saying, I don't think you need to do this many songs right now. Like, let's actually spend time doing 3 songs as opposed to 10 songs and do those 3 songs really well. In terms of like how the model is going to change in the future and where it's heading in terms of albums versus singles and stuff like that, I'm not really sure. I kind of put my head in the sand a little bit when it comes to that side of the industry because it just kills me. Rob is definitely the person to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for different genres and different bands. I think Juddy is a perfect example of a band that, Karnivool fans want an album. They don't want multiple singles. They want an album. They want a body of work. Whereas the industry as a whole, I feel, is moving away from the album. It's geared more towards singles and dropping them consistently. So instead of going away for, okay, 7 years is extreme. Let's hope there's not too many of that. But instead of going away for the classic example of, 2 or 3 years between albums, what you're seeing now, and I think this will only continue, is that bands are dropping singles every 2 to 3 months. And that will basically continue. Then there might be a little 6-month gap where they record and finish writing, and then it keeps going for another 18 months. So it's like an 18-month cycle of dropping songs every 3 months, and then the little break. And bands right now are working out how to do that, and how do you balance the touring and everything. So it's obviously because of Spotify and streaming that's pushed it, but it's also because so much of the revenue is built around touring, and you can't keep touring if you don't keep releasing new material. So I think it's all wrapped up in that demo. Juddy, what's your thoughts around this album versus single thing?
Like a lot of it also has to do with the patience of the consumer. So everyone's kind of, it's a world of instant gratification these days. So people want new music constantly, and the only way to do that is through releasing singles, I guess, and kind of having that drip feed approach, as opposed to, dropping an album every 2, 3, 4 years and having people having to sustain their attention for that gap where you're away and not touring. But I think it depends on, the viability of the act too. I think if you're a commercial band or, a pop star in that regard, you're kind of able to get away with just dropping a single that might hit the charts. You're not really touring. You're kind of just doing, the TV, the one spot shows here and there, the festival thing. So you don't really need an album to sustain the interest for that. Bands, I guess, that aren't as commercial tend to have more of a niche market, and the diehard fans that will kind of hang and wait for a record. So I think they're the fans that will usually spend a lot more time listening to one artist as opposed to jumping from track to track, like the Spotify playlist generation, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of depends on the act, I think.
It does. And Matt Bush in the comments section brings up a good point, because a band like King Gizzard is all about releasing albums and very consistently. So there's no one size fits all, but I think what I'm talking about is the general trend is away from albums towards singles. And honestly, being a manager of 2 bands that are sort of up and coming, I can really see the appeal in doing that, because so much of the money they generate, which ultimately helps create a living for them, is based around touring. And I saw it firsthand in Gyroscope. If you're not releasing music, it is hard to keep that audience engaged, coming to shows, buying merch. So I think it's a good way to go, but it's not for everyone. But again, great question, Damo. Really cool.
Awesome. Well, I'll throw another one out to Jake, who was in before. Jake's back in for round 2 because he had another great question. Jake, if you want to unmute and jump in.
Sorry, gang, my mouse is playing tricks on me. Thank you as well for your time, Tom. I didn't get a chance to say so before. I was curious about Brody's perspective when he's shifting between the session drummer role and the producer role. And you mentioned before that you're quite often going to, in the session drummer role, you're going to be playing the bare minimum. So I was curious to see if you actually ask drummers as well when you're working with them to play the bare minimum, the way you kind of receive it on the other end as well. And if you actually have to restrain yourself from letting them take the liberty at times.
I do find the main thing that I'm getting drummers to change is simplifying. And I think that really comes about because a lot of people are going into a recording situation having not necessarily really heard the songs they're playing, right? Like they've rehearsed them, but they've not really listened to them. So there's that element, and there's also the whole demo-itis and just being kind of having cemented parts for such a long time that you just know that a song goes a certain way. You can never have the objectivity of a first-time listener. So quite often what will happen as someone's rehearsed a song 1,000 times, they will add things and they'll add things and they'll add things, trying to make the song more interesting or trying to grow the song. And then what that really does is cloud their judgment, and you'll find that by simply taking a handful of things away, the part and the song itself just becomes, I mean, it's almost like it becomes more efficient in a way, like it becomes a more streamlined vehicle for delivering whatever message they're trying to deliver with that song. And that's really where like the potency of a song can really come through, when you like really get all the shit out of the way of the message of the song. And drums are some loud, abrasive shits to be in the way of the message of a song. So simplifying is one of the main things that I get people to do. And that's a tough thing to do as well as the drummer. Like if you've learned to play a song a particular way and you've done that several hundred times, taking a particular kick drum out of a chorus part because it really steps on the vocal can actually become the sort of thing that makes it almost impossible to play that chorus part, right? Like that's one of the biggest aspects of trying to do the session thing, is like being able to change a part on the spot and be able to actually put it down on the next take. So that's a really tricky thing, man. That's a completely different skill set to sort of just playing drums in general or writing drum parts as well. Is really being able to actually change things on the fly. And simplifying is almost always the case. And I came about that the hard way the first few times I actually recorded as a drummer in bands, where like every single take it was like, can you just please do less?
Yeah.
Because and like Rob said, like being like feeling like quite alone and being like the first person to put your parts down in the studio, it can be kind of like a lonely experience to be in the live room and have a bunch of people just kind of watching you through the glass without any real context for what you're doing. You might be playing to guide tracks or demos, but you don't really have the context of like, these are the songs that are going down, these are the sounds that we're going to be using. So it is actually quite often just a natural thing to want to fill more space than you actually really need to fill as a drummer.
Yep, that's cool. I want to build on that question and guide it over to you, Juddy. You know, you've used Forrester a number of times for recording, and then on Asymmetry, it was Nick Didia, I think, did that record.
Yeah.
Talk to us about those two producers and what each of them brought to the process for those albums.
Well, I guess you kind of put in a position where you have to contend with what we're bringing to them. So
yeah,
I think with Sound Awake, God, that was a half-cooked record at best when we got in with Forry. I think the thing that made that work was his familiarity with the band.
Yeah.
And I guess he kind of, like, we all knew Forry. There was a pre-existing relationship there. So we were all kind of familiar to a degree with how he worked, and he was familiar with everyone by me, but we'd kind of spent a bit of time together. So, you know, I think he knew what he was in for when we told him, you know, a lot of it wasn't finished, and he kind of knew somewhat how to approach it with the band. When we, like, I remember tracking, was it Simple Boy? We had like half a song. Mm-hmm. So I'd track the drums 3-4 times to that one point and would finish. And then he's like, all right, I guess you guys have to finish the song. So it'd send, you know, Drew and John in with jam.
Crazy.
And then he'd kind of listen, punch that sounds good. Let's get that down. And it would kind of just, I guess, evolve naturally with him at the helm.
Yeah.
The Nick Didia thing, I think, was a similar situation in that, you know, we had a 2/3 finished record maybe at best.
Yeah.
But without having that, I guess, without him having the knowledge of the band and how dysfunctional we were, it was far more challenging a process, I think.
Was it?
There were times where, you know, people were butting heads, approaching it in completely different, from completely different sides.
With Nick? Like, were you butting heads with Nick or band members?
Band members. I got along with Nick pretty well. I think I was kind of watching it unravel, to be honest, because I knew the process. Yeah. He had no idea what he was in for. So we kind of, you know, spent time tracking one of the songs, and he'd be like, that's good, let's get the drum parts down for that. I'd get 3/4 of the way through it, and then everyone else in the band would come and be like, all right, what we got to do here, and like try and navigate how we were going to finish the song. And I think it did his head in, to be honest. So
Yeah.
I was supposed to track the drums over the course of the week. I think I spent maybe 2-3 days tracking whatever we could get done. We got done, and then he was like, you have a break, we'll bring someone else in. We kind of worked at those songs. We had Drew running a little studio adjacent, trying to like get things together at the same time. And I could just see over the course of like that first week, Nick's head just exploding. So you've kind of got to, I guess, know what you're in for when it comes to recording from both perspectives.
I got to tell you, man, like having witnessed you guys writing Sound Awake over the course of a couple of years down at the Hen House, and then chatting with you and Kenny the other day, and also knowing all of you guys, and you're all such absolutely lovely guys, but the Karnivool creative process just sounds absolutely fucked. I just sounds terrible.
It
sounds terrible.
Proper fucked.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I'm glad we can agree on that.
I think that was like when you guys were down there for your last stint down at the studio. I think that was like the general consensus. Hey guys, how you going? Oh, fuck. And that was like, yeah, sweet. Sounds like you're writing another Karnivool album.
But it's amazing. Well, I mean, it still works, but it just sounds like hell. It sounds like hell.
Yeah. I mean, that was at a period where we were trying to put a new song together that was 4 years old at the time. So I think everyone was about as frustrated as Nick would have been during that session.
Oh, that's great.
Juddy, it must be nice then. I know you're not touring with them at the moment, but you were also the session drummer for the Veronicas for a long time there. It must have been nice to be able to just sort of like plug into the Veronicas. Well, these are the songs you're doing. This is what you have to do. Talk to us about that whole Veronicas experience.
God, it was such a cruisy gig in comparison. Kind of, you're stepping into a world where it's pop structures. They kind of know what they want. You're there to deliver one thing. And, the song's there. So you're basically just punching in, playing it as it is, working with the MD a bit, getting a bit of input from him.
Yeah.
It might be like, God, I think it was 1 or 2 rehearsals before we started playing shows.
Wow.
But it was so smooth in that regard compared to the Vool thing. It was just 2 sides of a coin, mate.
Yeah. And good experience touring with the Veronicas?
Yeah, it was awesome. They were lovely. All the crew worked with were fucking awesome. So it was just a different world for me too. So kind of just getting exposed to the pop side of things, I think was a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
But yeah, real cruisy, man.
No, that's awesome. Look, everyone, I'm going to just wrap up with 2 more questions. We've been going for a solid 2 hours here. Firstly, to you, Broads, what's really next for you, Underground Studios, and then also everything you're doing around session drumming and social media? Where would you like to see this in 3 to 5 years' time?
About 1,000 times more profitable.
Sure.
No, what I'm really kind of gearing towards now is actually really pushing the remote session thing.
Yep.
Because I think if there's going to be any positive that comes out of the last few months, it's going to be that people are going to be more willing to working in that regard, in that manner. And I'm in the process of building a new website, which I'm going to be selling drum samples and drum loop packages and stuff from.
Clever.
The $B sample pack?
There will be one that will be hinting towards a $B.
Nice, nice.
So I've been getting a lot of questions from especially a lot of hip hop producers through my Instagram about like, hey man, can I grab that loop, or can you send me that snare sample and that kind of thing. And I don't really like approaching it on an individual level like that because I don't want to kind of give out loops to people. So I'm just going to start doing give out loops to people for free, I should say. So I'm going to start doing loop and sample packages, basically kind of expanding upon the things that I've been doing, and continuing basically on the same sort of trajectory that I've been continuing on, that I've been working on with my social media stuff, because I'm starting to see some results with that, of people kind of coming to me for a specific thing. So I really want to do that. I want to carve a little niche, and I don't want to be the most prolific session drummer in the world or anything like that. I don't really want or need a hell of a lot of money. I just really want to kind of slowly and gradually work towards working on the kind of projects that I really want to work on in the drumming regard. As in terms of the studio, business as usual, really. Like,
Yep.
recording a handful of bands, putting out a handful of releases, and just trying to help people kind of put some songs together, really.
It's fantastic. You know, I got to sort of sit in with you last year with the Faim, who were finishing off that track of theirs, Humans, a couple of other things, I think, as well. And
Yeah,
it was phenomenal to see. Yeah, it was phenomenal to see you work close up, Rhodes. You were brilliant. And and then
so much.
and it's inspiring for me to see what you've created around the niche you're talking about. But you call it a niche, but you know it's global and it's really cool and it's inspiring. So keep up all of that great work, Rhodes.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Those Faim tunes came out great, and
Cool.
It was such a good session because it was just a group of people who just had such a clear focus on like we want this to be amazing, and we're going to put in however many thousands of takes we've made them put in.
There was a lot of takes,
and there was just no complaining about it ever.
Yeah.
Like it was just always like the best form of the song was always at everyone's heart, and it was great. Man. It was great.
Lyndon, give me 100 takes marathon. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was very cool. Juddy, sort of similar question to you. You know, you're sort of, 16 years deep into Karnivool now. And so two-part question. Where do you see yourself with Karnivool in the next 3 to 5 years? And then in drumming in general, where would you like to take it?
3 to 5 years, probably try to finish this record.
Yes.
Hopefully working on another one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Piece of string, really. Yeah, hopefully just kind of have some music out. The touring thing's kind of where I like. That's the part of it I love. Like the main part of the process I enjoy is the live shows. So whatever gets us doing more of those is kind of where I want to be. As far as playing, I kind of just as much as I can do. So gigs around town, any touring stuff that comes up, I'm kind of at that point now where I just will take most opportunities to kind of keep playing. I can find a challenge in anything. So anything that keeps me busy, really.
Yep, that's awesome, Juddy. And look, thank you so much for doing this, Juddy. Oh, Tom, please.
I just wanted to slide in because I've got one question for Juddy before it all wraps up.
Good.
I think I mentioned this in the Kenny podcast because I mixed a drum playthrough for you, Juddy, at like the the Cosmic Car Park, would have been 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Drew and stuff. And the first thing I noticed when I was slowly figuring out what I was doing is that you were playing with 2 different colored Converse shoes on. Is there any weird magic luck to that? Was there a reason blue and one was red?
It was to match the cams on my old Eliminators. So I used to cheat and use one blue and one red cam.
Wow.
So then I had evolved from socks to shoes. So I ended up wearing those shoes for years just to match the cams. It was a mini superstitious thing, I guess, but I retired them. We did the Roundhouse in London a few years ago, and they were so old and matted and smelled really bad. So I chucked them in the bin and I was about done. I can't waste a pair of shoes every time I buy 2.
So basically the key takeaway here is if you wear 2 different colored Converse, you can drum as good as Juddy.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
Perfect.
Right.
No,
it took us 2 hours to get there, but we got there.
Thanks, Juddy. Seriously, mate, you're a huge inspiration to myself personally, but to so many drummers within the West Australian community and global community. And just keep doing what you do, man. We love it. We love your creativity. When I get to watch Rick Beto do a breakdown of Goliath, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind. And when I see pictures of you playing to sold-out shows across the world, it's incredibly inspiring because you've been on an amazing musical journey. So thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for sharing, being so open and candid with all of this stuff. Everybody, I'm going to...
Thanks for putting it together, man.
Oh, no worries. I love this stuff. Rob. It's really cool. And it's, again, the ultimate goal here is like, let's just all get to know each other better, when I'm back in Perth towards the end of the year, I'm going to throw the biggest fuck off party for the Hen House Studio. So we'll all catch up and have a few brewskis.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a quick screenshot. So give me thumbs up here so I can share this and remember this. Beauty. That's lovely. Once again, thanks everyone for the great questions. Tom for helping out with everything. Juddy, you're a superstar. Brody, I keep learning different stuff of you every day, and I'll keep doing that by following the Instagram. Damo, Jake, everyone for the questions. Bloody lovely. Thanks, guys. What a pleasure. Take care. Keep drumming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, all.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.